and now I do. And God, is he terrific? And the script is terrific, written by two guys never heard of. And the direction by George C. Wolfe, who's known as a Broadway director, did a wonderful job in this. So well modulated and paced. Characters are well developed. Performances are terrific. Um, there's just so much to like about it. But always for me, this is the second time I saw it today, is the language. And of course, Coleman Domingo's delivery of that person. What a great guy he was. What an admirable personality. And is that how he struck other people? Yeah. Yeah. Is that all we get? I'm the only one who gets the cavell about, wow, what a great performance that was. And aren't I proud of myself because I recognized it? Come on.
Hmm.
This guy could win Best Actor, so be prepared. You
Yeah.
know,
Okay. He's nominated.
yeah, he is. So we'll see. It's kind of hard. You know, we'll see what the Academy does. But the film got very good notices, and so did he, and it's deserved. And what a life the guy had. Um, okay, so I can tell you're waiting for me to start it off. This film is a very busy process film. You hear about the behind the scenes manipulation of the march, right? And how are we going to do it? How are we going to take care of 200,000 people? It's not about launching the march. It's about getting there and getting everybody on board, all the different partners. And there's a line somewhere that the Black community was extremely divided, especially over Rustin and the old guard and the new guard in the NAACP. And there was lots of hostility. And, Rustin and King broke up, because, I didn't stop taking notes, but it was one scene after another where somebody tightened the screws on somebody else and they had to react and they had to take a chance. And, Adam Clayton Powell, the guy with the cigar who came in the fancy car to the meeting, he threatened to disclose that Rustin was gay and that he was going to say that he and Martin Luther King were lovers. Well, Adam Clayton Powell was black, and he was quite a power broker himself, and he resented these people intruding on his territory, and he didn't want King or uh, Rustin stealing his thunder. So uh, Rustin takes a risk. He says, "No, because Martin was threatened with this by Adam Clayton Powell's blackmail, I'm going to hand in my letter of resignation. But I know Martin like nobody else knows him. And I know he's going to refuse it because we're best friends." So he goes in there, presents to the board, and Martin says, "Okay, goodbye." It ends with him walking into the camera with this big close up and a music cue. And he was like nonplussed. He did not expect that. And they didn't speak for a couple of years after that. And it's interesting that Rustin goes back and works for the Americans Against the Vietnam War, run by the white guy, Musty, Muste. By the way, I've started watching these films with English subtitles, even if it's in English, and it really helps. You catch the names a lot better because you see them spelled out, helps you match a name with a face. And so it's this totally sincere anti-war movement organization. But the guy who runs it, right, says, you got to stop being angry because your parents rejected you because you were homosexual. You got to get right with God and straighten yourself out or you're never going to be happy. And it's like, oh my God, he almost as bad as the racist. He's a homophobe, you know. And Rustin walks out and he quits that day because he's had it. We see only in flashbacks. By the way, the movie begins. Did anybody decode what the opening of the movie was? Those faces and the quiet. Those were. You tell me, Rustin. What was it? Rustin Karazi, unmute.
Yes. Well, it was like different instances of like big moments in American history, like during the civil rights time, even after. This is after Brown versus Board, right? Is this or no, no, no. This is sorry. Wait, this is during segregation times.
Yeah.
But it was like, for example, I'm pretty sure it was showing Little Rock 9. Was that
well, it was
or the sit-ins? Like it was just
the
different.
drugstore lunch counters
Mhm.
that they invaded, and they were trained in those people were trained the way the black policemen were trained, not to be intimidated by those who would harass them. But that was to show, the blood, somebody poured ketchup on a black woman's head. So that's what told me, oh, that was meant to be a lunch counter. And it's just signs of racism and how the protest movement was going nowhere because these people were being defeated by the cruelty in the South. And Rustin spent years training people in civil disobedience. Martin got it from him. I learned in the movie. I don't know how true that is. But Rustin also cites Gandhi 2 times. He repeats his speech about Gandhi moved the whole nation with this. He tells his own people, and then he tells the NAACP, he makes the same speech. It's kind of cute. But he tells it with conviction each time. And, it's like you begin to feel this guy's personality very early in the very first scene when Martin says, no, you want me to participate in the Los Angeles protest movement. I'm not going to do it. And then Rustin comes out of the crowd, right? This is the first scene where you see King. He said, no, 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 you did this. You mesmerized the crowd somewhere else. This is your calling. You have to do it. And King does it. So immediately he's the eloquent, persuasive strategist who can convince Martin Luther King to do something he didn't want to do. So in our own minds, that elevates him to a player, yet this guy knew because he was gay that he had to accept that as a limitation for how high he could rise in the movement. Steve Zimmerman, you're muted, Steve. Unmute. Unmute yourself. There you
go. Unless I missed something, I don't think the Democratic convention thing in LA actually occurred, right? Because of the brouhaha over Rustin's homosexuality, and Martin Luther King withdrew from that, right?
I don't know.
I mean, that was my sense because he had agreed to do it. MLK agreed to do it, and then this problem occurred with. Rustin being accused of homosexuality, and it became a big issue, and MLK backed down. That's the way it seemed to me. So I don't think the LA thing happened.
Okay, interesting. They avoided that. I mean, this is not based on any one book, so they had all the facts, to play
with. Which is part of the disappointment, and why Rustin was so upset too.
Yeah, but it was the resignation, accepting his resignation that drove them apart. And of course, the issue became that Chris Rock, who plays the head of the NAACP, said, no, we're not going to do this. We don't believe it. This is not good for us. And so that was the obstacle. And it was another player, I forget his real name, said, you can do this with Martin. You don't need the NAACP. And if you can get Martin, then the NAACP will come along, which is very interesting. So it's the behind the scenes machination, a political, even on the part of the black groups, people form groups and they have disagreements and they're turf wars. And I want to take credit for this. And no, you can't, I want to. And it's how he managed to plow his way through all those obstacles and to get his team in place. And once he had King, then he got the NAACP. And once he had them and other black groups, he got the unions and their money, right? And there's a very nice union segment in there where they make the point. Tom, the quiet boyfriend, says, my father was a transportation worker. And they're lobbying the unions for support, and that's where you see hands stuffing the dollars into the lock boxes. So, this is broad thinking, across the whole spectrum. They're really thinking who would align themselves with us because it's in their interest. Like the black policemen from New York agreed to leave their guns, 1,100 black policemen in white hats. A stroke of genius, and what can I say? You watch this thing unfold, and every scene is as delicious as the next one. Steve, you're muted. You're muted. Steve Zimmerman, you're muted. Okay, you figure out how to unmute.
Okay, I think
there you go.
I'm trying to explain I'm on a different device than usual. I have an issue with the other device, and it's been a little confusing. The hand, I'm trying to get back down again. I didn't.
Well, you go to reaction.
Yeah, I know. I
Okay.
know. I had trouble getting to the reaction.
Yeah.
And now I got it.
I'm having trouble getting reactions too tonight, so don't feel alone. What are the other notable moments there? You know how in the beginning they all talk around Rustin being gay, who you are, and Wilkins won't even say the word, and Powell says, I will out him. And then Randolph objects, but there's blackmail going on there. And submits his resignation. MLK accepts it. And then we see him working at that anti-war group, which is kind of a step down. And you see him thinking, there's that scene where he's drawing, it looks like doodles on paper. And he's actually planning a march that's the reflecting pool in Washington, D.C. And then he has that great meeting where he rouses the troops, where he says, come on, we're going to brainstorm together. And he gets ideas from different people, and they get excited because he's making the group work together to address problems that they have yet to know existed, but, and to raise possibilities of people. Carol, yeah, unmute. There you go.
Okay, hi, all the techno. Thank you so much for suggesting this movie. I spent 2 nights this week watching the wrong movie, putting it in, I got Boycott, but I wasn't on Netflix, and that was just in haste and on me. Just further background for this period of our history. 2 things. Chris Rock. Quite randomly, or is it too early in the discussion?
No, we can talk about him.
I turned on the TV randomly this afternoon, and Chris Rock from a 2003 movie, Head of State, was acting as if he were a candidate for president. And the maturity of Chris Rock as an actor was so nice to see in his part in this film, and just hours apart of viewing the other.
When did that movie come out? Do you know?
It was 2003, so
Wow.
20 years ago.
So it's not like he just became a good actor.
No.
overnight.
Well, it was completely different skill that he offered in this Rustin. And another point I really, really was so thrilled to discover was that when I was first listening without doing a lot of referencing tonight, because I realized I'd watched and I thought this movie isn't just the right taste. The music was just the right taste for this movie. And then I thought, it's not just in good taste, it's tasty. And discovering it was Branford Marsalis was really a delight. And if I can offer to you and our classmates, Branford Marsalis is a marvelous saxophonist. And my late husband composed a melody for a character that Sean Connery played in the Russia House. And Sean Connery's character was a saxophonist. And Branford Marsalis did all the playing. And that theme is so beautiful. And it was resurrected from the trunk of things that were written by the Bergmans that Barbra Streisand never sang. And she put out an album, I'm going to say about 10 years ago, maybe 8 years ago, songs that of the Bergmans I never sang. And one was this Alone in the World, which was the love theme from the Russia House with a gorgeous solo by Branford Marsalis.
Well, he's from a wonderful musical family too, like the Jacksons, his father and his brother. Really, really, totally great talents.
I'm so
And
glad to
I
be
didn't
able
realize
to-
it was him until I saw the credits tonight at the end. But some of those cues were haunting, and it just, I think you nailed it. It had just the right tone. You
It
would
couldn't
never.
have been art symphonic. It couldn't have been really anything else and be just perfectly appropriate
Yeah.
and expressive as a underscoring.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
It was not a big symphonic score. It was
Oh.
just a few instruments, and the lead instrument always, led the pack. And it was, but it was delicate, and it was appropriate. It said, "This is about one man,"
Yes.
and it didn't lionize or make a hero out of anybody more than they needed to be. I mean, it kept them human, and that's to the author's credit.
Jim, I wanna say why I like the movie so much from a completely different perspective. I mean, I've certainly taught American history. I thought I knew American history, but Bayard Rustin was just a person I was completely unfamiliar with. So the whole story was just fascinating and compelling. I mean, forgetting just the acting was superb, but the storyline was amazing. And it just makes me wonder, I mean, I'm pretty familiar with American history, but how many of these Black stories are out there that we know nothing about? I mean, I could tell you all the white guys in American history, but my understanding of some of the heroic people is just non-existent.
Well,
I,
history is written by the winners, and they often suppress what they don't want to be known. And I'm glad you brought this up because it's a kind of muting or silencing of important voices like his. And what a smart guy, and for those of us, I can remember somebody, by the way, did you notice that Barack and Michelle Obama are executive producers? This is their production company, Higher Ground. They've done other things. They did the interview with Prince Andrew after he left the royal family. It was a good get for them, but it was watched by a lot of people. So they're trying to do the right thing with their media presence and their power. And certainly this film is a feather in their cap. But it's like their imprimatur was, yes, this guy, I mean, they probably knew about him, but it's history has left this guy in the ash heap, and shouldn't it? If Rustin, maybe you've wondered what political operatives do. Did this give you an inside look at what it must be like when you're really struggling with people in power? You want to comment on that? Or did I put you on the spot, Rustin?
Wait, me? I'm sorry. It gets
Yes,
confusing.
you.
Okay. Wait.
This is like a primer in political strategy and what political operatives do, but you never read about it in this kind of detail. Maybe in some of the books that cover history.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like obviously history is told by the winners, like you said, and it's easy to just look at who was the face of movements or who was the loudest voice or who was the one with the mic or on the cameras as kind of the forefront of everything. Like you also see that with like presidential candidates where you think that this president is doing everything when there's tons of people behind the scenes that are really putting the show on the road. And I feel like it shed light, this movie, not only on, the civil rights movement took tons of people, but also that the civil rights movement needed to be tons of people from different backgrounds. And Rustin, like being a gay man in the 50s and 60s, that takes a lot of confidence. That takes a lot of resilience that I feel like had to be highlighted in this movie. And I think this is a perfect time for this movie to come out too. In light after mass BLM protests and things like that. I just thought it was phenomenal, and with the performances. But no, I definitely think that it gave a lot of insight into like what the march took and how these giant like historic moments in history doesn't just take one man or one face or one group, but so many different people with so many different backgrounds and stories that should be told.
Yeah, I mean, they wanted 2 days and they got one because somebody said, you got to be a realist. We need their money. It's called strategy, is what I think Chris Rock said to him. An interesting thing, there's an exchange between Rustin and Martin. And Rustin is describing Martin to Elias. We haven't talked about that relationship yet. He said, the reason why King is such an effective speaker is that he speaks the truth as he sees it. He holds nothing back. And of course, Rustin is the same way, and he's been swimming uphill his whole life from the day he was born. But his grandmother, who raised him, sort of prepared him. He had a booster from childhood. And in a way, she was a stronger voice than had his mother remained. And the fact that his mother left, this strong Black woman sets him right with the world, and encourages him. That's very funny. When she learned he liked to dance with boys, she said, well, what am I supposed to do with that? There's a lot of fun in this, and it's just so real. And he really had the support that he needed from this one woman. And so when he describes Martin, he's also describing himself, is what I felt. He holds nothing back. I mean, God, the guy's got a mouth on him. He mouths off to everybody. And he never backs down. Backing down on the 2 days going into one is not really backing down. It's accepting, if you want to be successful, just lower the bar a little bit. Can't you give them this one thing, if somebody says? And it's like it's horse trading in pride, in power, sometimes money. It's like people. This film is a constant negotiation between one person or another. Let's talk about the relationship with Elias, because it's so interesting the way the film handles it. From the very get-go, in the first scene, after that bathroom scene, it's clear that something's going on between them. They arrange a tryst for Saturday night after his wife leaves town. And they don't say it, but Rustin sees into Elias that he's willing, or that he's in need, and or he's been hiding from himself. And there is a pursuit. There's the kiss on the street that Elias leaves. It's kind of a teasing thing, but he shows up later and says, give me the courage I need. And it's kind of sweet. It's discreetly told. It's not clear. There's the white guy, Tom, who was a lover of Rustin's, who is now sort of like his secretary, gets him hired back, and he can live in the apartment. But Tom is like the jilted lover who it's not possible anymore. And he says, I can't give you, maybe when all this is settled and I'm older, I could give you what you need, but I can't do it now. That happens late in the movie. But there is a scene when with Tom, where he pulls Tom towards him, and Tom says, no, I can't do this anymore. And that happens. I don't want to bother looking at my notes, but that happens after he's rejected in another way. And he wants solace. He wants comfort of somebody he can be intimate with. And so that's the cost, in a way. That relationship is more realistic than the relationship with Elias, although I assume it's true. Because it's insight into Tom's character and how much he needs to be close to Rustin, even though they're not lovers anymore. Um, it's the need is always there in the background. You know it's there. Very early in the film, when he's poring over the designs, you see white arms embrace Rustin from behind, and it turns out to be Tom. So that's all you need to define the relationship. By the way, we talked about Maestro and Leonard Bernstein, and someone in Tablet magazine criticized it because it didn't develop the gay characters in his life enough. And you don't have to when that's not what it's about. Maestro proved that. And in a way, this film does too. I mean, the Elias relationship was more heavily played on than that with Tom. That Tom walks in. Oh, that's right. Tom walks in, and Elias walks out because he sees them kissing when Rustin's playing the lute. And it's like that. The homosexuality is so diminished against the backdrop of the importance of this event that you buy it. You don't ask for any more of it. It's discreetly done, and it's just that's who he is, and it sort of informs his need, and it also informs the bias against him. But I think it's discreetly handled. And what are people's feelings about that?
I think there's a lot about the way this was handled dialogue-wise, which is very interesting. All the people of power, the named people, Elias and Chris Rock, Adam Clayton Powell, they all spoke in a polished, educated, powerful way.
Yeah.
And he didn't. But he was just as powerful or more. He spoke in he snuck up on you. To me, he kind of snuck up on you behind. He didn't use the same bombastic language, but he got down to like the real core of what his feelings were and was able to express them differently.
He quickly, very quickly, and rudely sometimes got to the truth of a situation when other people dared not say it, and about their motivations. And the guy was like he had high emotional intelligence is what it's called these days in psychology circles, where he knows what people are feeling and what they're doing, and he's able to articulate it. And he uses that skill as a weapon. That's how he bulldozes over people, even Martin in the beginning. That opening speech about, come on, you're a great speaker, you mesmerize people, you're meant to do this, and you've done it before, you can do it now. And King agrees until he backed out. So speech is a weapon for him. It's how it helped him survive. Betty, unmute yourself first, or we can't hear you. Lower left corner, there you go.
I got it. Yeah, I agree. He had incredible emotional intelligence. I do remember I don't remember much about him, but I remember the name, and the only thing I really remembered about him was that that he was a social activist and very big in the civil rights movement. So it was really interesting to see just how big, much bigger than I realized, and all that, what he was able to do. But as far as what was said about his emotional intelligence, the fact that what he was able to accomplish, even with people who disagreed with him, he was able to get all these people mobilized to accomplish something incredible. So yeah, I had no idea about that. And the other thing I just wanted to mention, and I don't know, it was just I wondered the point that we're talking about the Tom who was he made the comment, I can't give you what you want now, maybe at a future point. I wondered if that was because he was white, and if they were trying to get this movement on the ground, and they saw him, and if it all came out that that he was involved with a white, never mind he was gay, but also with a white man if he felt that would harm the movement.
I don't think so. I think he did what he wanted.
Okay.
He never apologized, never explained. Maybe you've heard that before. And look, it was still not okay to be gay with a black man. The white man was maybe more an affront to the Southern people, but he learned not to censor himself. He says to Elias, how can you live without that which you most want? But on the other side of the coin, Rustin has to promise King that he'll behave himself on the march and he won't have any dalliances. So it's what can I say? The guy, had self-discipline and self-knowledge and a humility, like that's what that joke about the trash collector is at the end. No, I'm not going to meet the president. He didn't ask for me, but I'm not going to be the 11th man. I'll pick up the trash, and he borrows the bag from somebody and starts picking up trash. That I thought was a little hokey. I don't know if that actually happened, but that was a little theatrical. Steve Zimmerman.
A couple things. It also the movie shows how luck and chance and serendipity also affects things. I mean, both Elias and Rustin came within moments of disaster, of being busted at the gay bar, right?
Yeah.
But it was pure luck, and so sometimes things hang by a thread in that sense.
Mm-hmm.
I also incidentally thought there was it's a sort of an artistic movie in a way. There's references. I don't know if people picked up on. There's sort of like an homage to Caravaggio and one to Norman Rockwell in this thing. Rustin is playing the flute. And Caravaggio, just the sense and the feeling sense of it's almost like what do they call it, a poem type image. He's playing the flute as a gay person, and Caravaggio is famous for that situation with gay people and flutes. At the beginning of the movie, there was an homage to Norman Rockwell, if you picked it up.
What was that?
At the very beginning, they showed some desegregation scenes right after Brown versus Board of Education was passed in '54. And there's the famous Rockwell painting, The Problem We All Have with Ruby Bridges walking between U.S. Marshals and National Guard behind her, right?
The little girl.
It's literally the Ruby Bridges painting.
Oh, right. It did
The
look
little girl's
Rockwellian.
just skipping along.
Yeah, in her white socks and just her legs.
That was
between
Rockwell.
Men.
Again,
Yeah,
meant to capture the feelings of the period. And and actually, by the way, it was kind of an enjoyable movie to watch from an emotional point of view because it shows and kind of recaptures the kind of optimism in the movement that existed back in the '60s, that they were breaking down these racist structures, right? And these segregationist people, and compared to now, right, where everything seems to be raw and have a hard edge and cynicism, and there's a lot of anger. You don't have that kind of optimism about resolving big problems in society, and it kind of that was still a more a period where that could be embraced and showed.
Hope was possible then.
Yeah. It seems much less possible right now.
It doesn't seem like it, even though Obama ran with that as his watchword on his first campaign. But there was a sense of maybe we can do this. Maybe we can get something done. I mean, I was a college student when this took place. And it was mostly white college, of course, but that was a time when the president of the college said every class that enters now will be 10% Black mandate. And they've even expanded that to this time. But it takes people, that was an indicator that change was possible. But there were few and far between. Mostly it was the Black Southerner, the white Southerners who wouldn't give up the Confederate fallacy and their racist attitudes. And the
And the movie-
conservatives, you know, it was love it or leave it. Kimberly, glad you're speaking up. Oh, no, you're saying no? You're dismissing me?
Carol, but anyway, I will speak up and say he reminded me so much of when I was listening to the character. I kept thinking of James Baldwin and just two brilliant Black men who were both gay. It was pretty interesting. So.
Yeah. Now, did we discuss I Am Not Your Negro, the movie, like 3 years ago?
I wasn't around.
No.
I think so. I definitely remember watching it
Yeah.
a few years ago. It was probably for one of your meetings.
Yeah, that was a documentary about James Baldwin, entirely in his own words. And after 90 minutes of his words, you say, oh my God, what a brilliant man this was. And he had a way with words as well that were like so truthful and so impactful. He like had thought it all through and he was just sharing it off the cuff. By the way, in terms of the roots of rap, James Baldwin did spoken word musical moments too in the 50s. Interesting. No, he is a much too much forgotten person. So yeah, that's I recommend that film to anybody because it's just another revelation of a real intelligence that we denied and that we didn't learn as much from as we could. And of course, died too young. And he spent a better part of his life in Paris because he felt it was a more kind atmosphere for a Black man or a gay Black man. So we lost his presence. And, you know, it's like racism hurts everybody, you know, except the perpetrators of it don't realize they're preserving their supremacy and they don't realize what they're missing, you know, with the racism, what they suppress and the talent they suppress. And that's one of the sins of racism. Not that it's the only one, but we saw a film called After the Rain about South Africa, white soldier, blonde girlfriend, white man found in her bed, hostage drama. And that film its motivation was by a South African writer who wanted to show how apartheid hurt white people as well, because it pushed this soldier's instincts to kill to the limit. And he lost what he loved most, which was her, his girlfriend. And until that happened, he was holding the girlfriend and the Black man hostage overnight in a mad rage. And that changed him. You know, we talked about this before, where trauma really changes people. It's the only thing that can, unfortunately. And something traumatic has to happen to an individual to get them to reverse long-held opinions that may need correction. So yeah, I mean, everybody loses. Let me see if I can't resurrect from my scribbled notes something that's interesting to talk about. Oh, that scene where I forget his name, but the colleague is training the Black cops to resist intimidation and harassment. I mean, that's been shown in other films, but that was so telling and so smart. No guns, white hats, armbands. You know, you're about calmness. You're not about violence. And that was done in a very economical way, showing the training. But that's how it was. It was role playing. You know, you had to like submit yourself. I forget what movie. I think it may have been in Chicago 7. I know there's an actual documentary material of the lunch counters in Chicago 7, but those protesters, you know, had to be trained to resist being spat upon, you know, called the worst things in the world, and being pushed around. And it was like what Rustin says on the bus is terrific. His flashback. He sits up front on the bus, not in the back, and the police come on board and say, "You got to go." And he says, "No, I won't, because if I go, that little girl over there won't see injustice played out in real life. She should see this." So he allows them to beat him up really badly. And that's when he was a young man. 20 years before the film takes place. But sometimes that's what it takes, you know. It's like you lay down in front of the napalm trucks outside of Dow Chemical during the Vietnam War out of protest. I had a friend who did that, and I wasn't surprised that he did it, or did I object when I learned it, but it was like, I thought brave, braver than I would have done. I just marched, you know, once. So it's, you know, we're all called upon, we're all tested, you know. It's like you've heard me say before about World War II was a test for everybody, you know, a test for the Jews, a test for the plain Germans who weren't Nazis, you know, and we all have things we're not proud of. And it's like, you know, this is when you rise or fall. And you know, this is what movies are made for, is that kind of conflict. You know people through their actions, and sometimes they're not brave actions like Rustin's was. The raid on the gay bar that somebody brought up, there were photographers there because sometimes the police tip them off. Like, the cards are stacked against everybody, you know, when the police and the government is unfair. Oh, and at the very end, there's this great line about our ultimate shame and our ultimate oppression is when we work for our oppressors by believing, you know, what they say about us, you know, and it's justice for all or not, you know. It's you can't be justice for only white people or straight people, you know, to have true justice. And he says he won't resign. You know, he says, you're going to have to fire me. And of course, that was politically untenable too, because the staff would have rebelled, for one thing. And then there's the MLK speech on TV, where they defend the accusations of Hoover or Powell. I think it's Hoover. And it brings tears to his eyes because MLK is saying he's the most moral, finest person I know, and he's a friend. And that was a very emotional moment in the film. It earned its stripes there. So the film wasn't about the march. It was about relationships and testing relationships and using them and bending them. I just find it, as you said, Carol, the tone was always right. It was just so well conceived in every way. I stopped, like, that's why I hated to take notes, because I just wanted to watch the film. You know, I didn't want to have to record it, you know, so I could talk better about it. But some films do that to you. I've done that with students where I stopped observing and I just watched it. I stopped creating notes on their work and I just watch it because it's compelling and it's a gold standard. And, you know, for this, George C. Wolfe has directed other movies, but none as persuasive as this, although they're all good. Rustin, you have something you want to say?
Yeah, I apologize. I was in the bathroom, so I'm not sure if we covered this. But I was gonna mention about what I found interesting was obviously the irony of Elias, right?
Yeah.
That's what he said. It was interesting, obviously, him being a future pastor, like said, to take on the church.
Yeah.
But I also thought it was interesting just his commitment to his religion. Like you mentioned twice before that he always wanted to serve God.
Yeah.
So this kind of like juxtaposition between you know, like their like commitment to their religion while also their like homosexual tendencies was really interesting to see. It almost felt like there was two films going on at the same time. Like one of this like civil rights arc and reaching us to eventually coming to the march, and then this other second film of his experience as a gay guy in the 50s and 60s. So yeah, it did, to me, honestly, like at times I didn't feel like the movie was consistent in that sense that, like I said, I felt like I was watching two different films, but I still think that it's the themes of the movie like shined through perfectly, and it tried to cover a lot in a pretty short amount of time,
Mhm.
but I think it did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I didn't feel the disconnect that you did. I felt that because this was such a part of Rustin's life that, and it affected his feelings, although not his work, right? That it was woven through. But the same oppression, it's like you nailed it. He wants to serve the church that would condemn him if they knew. And it's all over our history. And it's too bad. But that's where he was stuck, how he was trapped. I mean, even his haircut and the way he dressed was very perfect, right? What do you hide when somebody looks too perfect? What are they hiding? And he was hiding plenty because his father-in-law was going to give him the reins to the church. And he was a great speaker. He had all the rhythms right, and the piano was orchestrating every hallelujah. But there's that moment when he talks about you deserve to be loved, and he's looking at Rustin in a pew. So it's a bit. I saw that B storyline as a bit ironic because it's Rustin can't get freedom for himself because the society at large won't accept him, and he's really married to the march, but he needs a human connection. And but he's always true to himself, like Martin was, and so I can see why you might feel that way. I thought they did a good job of interweaving the two, struggling with his impulses and struggling against. It's like his church was the forces of the march that wanted to condemn him, Adam Clayton Powell and others said we can't have this gay guy leading us, And then it took King to step up and Randolph to say, this is a great man. Risa, your hand is up.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the power of Elias's wife that she had over him that was stronger than what Rustin had over him.
Mm-hmm.
And she struggled to maintain her love of the church, her love of her father, maybe her love of Elias, or maybe her position. And I thought it was interesting, not so much about his being homosexual, but the impact on the wife and
Mm-hmm.
his choice to go back to his wife and his family. The family pulled him stronger than the march or anything else. I thought that was a very strong presentation of what the spouse goes through.
Yeah. And she, the first scene we see her, it's outside that bathroom scene. And she says, oh, I was in Selma and I met you and you were so wonderful. And she says, oh, I wish we could get together tonight, but I'm leaving. It's Saturday night. I'm going back to New York or wherever they were from.
But
and then the next time you see her, it's that phone call.
Right.
Wonderful phone call. Really great performance.
I thought it was well done.
And did anybody spot Audra McDonald in that? My wife is a big fan. Yeah. Mitch, what'd you think of her? Don't get up. It's okay. Audra McDonald was, I forget her name, Bessie or something. Bess. She was a senior Black leader. Was having dinner.
Baker. Wasn't her character was named Baker, right?
Baker, right.
Wasn't she? Yeah.
And she was having dinner with him, and she really, told him, what he has to do.
She's always superb.
She's always right.
Superb.
And I think we just saw another movie where she had one scene where she was superb in too. And I asked my wife, my wife said, oh, that's an acting lesson in itself. And I said, what was there about it that she could teach a young actor? It's mostly the use of her voice. And then we dissected it. And it was the way she used pitch in her voice for emphasis and her body language and her facial language. It's like it was all an orchestration of the content that she was trying to say and get across to him. And I learned something from that. It was, she used her pitch, just like another part of speech, pitch of her voice.
CC Pounder did a good job too.
And was she the heavyset doctor? Hegemony.
Yes,
She was great, yeah.
exactly. She brought up the women's issues. That's that's how they brought that in, and I'm glad they addressed that. Those problems
There
continue
were no
to plague.
women, yeah.
Well,
and even in African American culture and society, I mean, those problems continue today. It emerged on TV in the Fannie Willis testimony, where she broke up with this guy, this district attorney prosecuting the case, which she should never have gotten involved with, of course,
Right.
but because he was a sexist. It's like, you can make my sandwiches or something like that. That's what she testified to. She couldn't stand it. It was ridiculous.
Kimberly, you have something to add, and then Betty?
Yeah, I had mixed feelings about wanting to watch the film, and mainly because I kind of I get overload with civil rights films, slavery films, and Holocaust films. They take me into a dark place and it's hard to get out of. But at the end of this one, I felt very sad, and that was because that film could have been made today. I mean, we are back there, the whole gay marriage equality thing, everything is being reversed back, and it was like watching a film that was going to do this big time capsule, where you could watch the air shoot back behind you.
Right, it would be right at home today. Because it is, we see it happen today.
Right.
And white supremacists are hearkening back to a time that never was. Just like Strom Thurmond and what his demands were. There was a little radio bite from him. Mitch? Oh. Okay, let's let Mitch figure out. Mitch, you're muted, so let me take Betty first. First person to unmute gets to talk. Mitch, Betty, or maybe the Raybos want to say something.
I was going to say that in today's world, we have shooters. And so if we had a march like that, it would be it's a great thing for, someone to come out and shoot and kill people. And that's my fear.
Yeah. Well,
the group today is in danger.
I was going to say the same thing, that it took 60 years to bring this guy to his rightful place as a hero. And then I related it to the fact that they had a 250,000 person march. And I don't recall anyone either being shot at or arrested. And of course, Kansas City had a celebratory parade, and that's 60 years later, and Denver had the same problem. And of course, they couldn't get through without somebody getting shot. It's certainly brings to light the environment that we're living in now and how frightful it is. But we certainly, I guess, enjoyed, if you could say that, enjoyed the film, and it brought to light a lot of memories of the 60s that I guess I was so busy studying, I didn't see what was going on at the time.
Well, most of us were there. Betty, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just curious, Jim, in your research, because, as I said, I'd heard of Bayard Rustin, but really didn't know other than that he was a social activist. And I was curious, was it known at the time? Because there was so much about, the fact that he was gay, and I didn't remember any of that, or whether that made a big brouhaha. And I just wondered if at the time, was it well known? And because as I say, I didn't remember anything about that.
Well, look, I was 20 years old at the time. Maybe you were too. And I don't remember a thing about his name, it just was not in the news. Now, I didn't read newspapers the way I do today. And I didn't do any additional research for this. But think about it. People come to light all the time, quiet heroes. He was a major player, though. And who knows what else history will discover. But you look at women behind the scenes in the women's movement.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't hear about Bella Abzug anymore and how important she was. And there are hundreds of others. And now we did see that film, the three portraits of the feminist, Gloria Steinem, The Three Glorias. Wonderful film we saw and discussed. Gloria Steinem at 3 points in her life. And so, yeah, she was on everybody's mind because she founded Ms. Magazine and many other things. But it's like, we can always, this is why history is valuable, but we often only understand it when we look backwards at it. It just, even though it's smacking us in the face and we don't see it when we're living through it. I was talking to somebody today who's writing a book on digital media and Hollywood, the history of it. And it goes way back to the Alan Turing and the breaking the code of the Russian Enigma box. And before that, there were precursors to digital processing. And his conclusion was that, nobody was recording the history of the digital movement until a very famous guy who created the Maya computer language died at age 46 of a heart attack. And all the other coders and, computer scientists said, holy shit, we better start recording our history because we're all finite. And if we have to write it down because we're here now. So it's, we all feel that way about our own lives, but very few of us write biographies or keep contemporaneous notes.
Well, just as a point of history, in the biographical notes at the end, it's noted that the guy named Elias, I guess, had a 10-year relationship with Rustin. So it endured, and it's not important, I guess, what happened to Elias's wife, but it is important that Rustin was able to keep this relationship and Elias was able to leave the marriage.
Are you referring to the card at the end that said he married and they were together for 10 years? He used another name, though, so that was very unclear.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was another man or not, but he eventually had a relationship for 10 years. So I don't know. I'll take further research. I got confused by that. Anybody else have anything urgent to say? This is one of those films that it blows by you. It played very fast. It's an hour and 48. And I was just enthralled to the words and the performance. It really a remarkable achievement. And, bravo to everybody who put it together. So I don't have anything to talk about for 2 weeks from now. It is February 28th and March 6th are both Wednesdays instead of Thursday. That's what somebody put in the notes. I think it's Hannah did that very nicely for us. And but you'll hear from me, hopefully the weekend before the next one. I'm happy to say goodnight unless somebody else wants to be heard. Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say that one of the sweeter scenes to me in the movie, and that one that brought the reconciliation between Martin and Baird, was when Coretta invites Baird in.
Mm-hmm.
They start singing This Little Light.
Mm-hmm.
Martin walks in, he sees Baird is really part of his family.
Yeah, I mean, he knew that before. It hurt him too, the separation. By the way, what drives them together? It's the shooting of Medgar Evers.
Right.
Right. And it's like that's one of those assassinations that, it's easy to forget about because there were so many others. Terrible, terrible history. But that's interesting that over the grief of this man they had both worked with and respected, they needed each other to process the grief. And right as soon as they sit down, they start talking about, did you hear about Medgar? It's like they cut to the chase. And then very quickly that scene turns to, come on, let's join forces. We have to do this together. And they do. All right. Well, I'm glad you all enjoyed it. It's funny.
Thank you for recommending it.
Well, I'm always on the prowl for you, you know. It's like I only show you films I like that I find meaningful and that will provoke discussion. This one, not so much, but we all got it. And it's stuff that needs to be seen and heard, you know. So I was very grateful. And, you know, I look forward to more for everybody who was involved in that, especially Coleman Domingo and George C. Wolfe, whom you know, I just thought I saw some other film he directed and it was just a film of the play. But this was a real movie. Okay. So thanks for participating. We'll see you in 2 weeks and you'll hear from me by email. And to all the new people, and the latecomers coming back, Eric and Rustin and Hannah, I've seen your window before. And Arlene Warchel, you've been silent tonight, but it's always good to have you. And Ruben. So looking forward to see you again in 2 weeks. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Where do you find That's a good thing.
Ding.